America's courts are in many ways the last great battleground in America. It's where so many issues that are dividing communities, states, and the entire country are being settled. But are these issues being resolved, or are court decisions just making America's divide even deeper? Are courts being respected as the final word? How should we view the role of courts from the county to the Supreme Court? Do they have too much authority? Are they overstepping? And if you happen to be a lawyer, and a lawyer who happens to be a Christian, how do you view your role in a profession that increasingly seems at odds with people of faith? You'll meet a leading lawyer who has given a lot of thought about his role as a witness for truth in the courtroom. Stay with us. One day, many years ago, Randy Wenger was hanging drywall when a Christian radio program he was listening to was talking about the fight for religious liberty in America. Somehow, a man who was an economics major in college found life on a different path, eventually leading to the founding of Independence Law Center, a nonprofit public interest law firm who represent individuals, private entities, and even local governments with legal advice, legal representation, and oftentimes expert testimony before school boards and state legislative committees. Today, Independence Law Center is at the center of nearly every court case in Pennsylvania involving the preservation of religious liberty, promoting marriage and family, protecting human life, and improving education. And it's all funded without a dime of taxpayer money or support. Imagine that. Randy, thanks so much for joining me on State of Independence. It's a joy to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, were you already a Christian when you heard that little thing when you were doing the drywall, or were you so tired of having to do the drywall that you said, "Lord, please"?
Well, I wasn't doing drywall for a living. I'm not muscular enough to be able to do work like that. But working on a family business, my mom had an art gallery. It was losing money, and I was, at that time, I had been working for a management consulting firm and thought, I can come home and I can figure out how to make this thing profitable. And part of it was moving, building a new shop, and it was there where I heard Jay Sekulow talking about religious liberty fights, and thought, wow, that really kind of marries my love of public policy, something that I could get involved to try to affect culture and go to law school to do it, not realizing that there's like 5 jobs out there in the country to be doing that kind of work. Right. So it wasn't necessarily a smart plan, but it was my plan, and God ended up using it.
Yeah, there are more jobs hanging drywall than there are doing what you want to do, right? Yeah. But God used you. So did you go right away to law school after that, or what'd you do? Did you still stick around for a little bit and do other things?
I stuck around while I was applying to law school, and put in a few applications, ended up going to Penn Law School. I really enjoyed my experience there, and was still convinced that my plan was to do religious liberty law. I worked while I was in law school for a friend of mine. He was doing religious liberty work out of his basement, and I helped him out of my basement and thought, that's great, I've got a plan. And his work dried up, and then I ended up working with a great bunch of guys in Lancaster County. But it was angry people suing other angry people, and I think questioning again why I went to law school.
How did God find you from where you were in Lancaster, working in the law business, which helps sometimes angry people get back to other angry people, to getting to where you are now? I mean, how did God find the path to get you there?
Well, it's really a testament to prayer. My wife, who's got a whole lot more wisdom than I did, perhaps a bit more faith, said, why don't you just pray for the kind of work that you were envisioning doing when you went to law school? And I don't know that I had the faith for it, but maybe God answered her prayer of faith, or the friend that I was praying with, and it turned out soon after that we were getting cases dealing with religious liberty, pro-life issues, and finding ourselves in federal court doing the kinds of things that I went to law school to do. So And that ended up getting the attention of Michael Geer at the Pennsylvania Family Institute. Yeah. And we had some conversations about starting a law center there for the Family Institute, because Michael said, look, we're involved in trying to accomplish the same things, trying to bring truth that helps people on these family values issues through our legislative work. But so often we're winning things in the legislature, losing them in court, or losing things in the legislature that can be properly won in court when we're making reference to our constitutional rights. Why don't we marry a law center in here and be able to accomplish some of those things? So
is that what happened?
That's what happened in 2006. Day after one of my daughters was born, I was out interviewing with Michael. I realized that I probably should have stuck around a little bit longer before doing the interview, but yeah, started there, and ended up not just doing litigation. I found that as they were dragging me along to the Capitol, meeting with legislators, I loved it. It was the part of my legal experience I enjoy the most, which is appellate arguments in front of judges. And it was kind of the same thing. You get an argument, and a single person there who's got questions about issues, and how can you weave things together to be persuasive. So I ended up finding that I love that work as well.
Yeah, yeah. Tell me about the challenge from the other side. There are people watching saying, well, why do we need folks to defend religious liberty? Doesn't everybody understand what we believe, what we hold as dear? I mean, aren't these truths evident, to everybody?
Well, when we started at the Independence Law Center, one of our taglines was, defending self-evident truth or inalienable rights and that sort of thing. But clearly, I think in this day and age, nobody on our side believes that everyone agrees with us anymore. Back in the 90s, there was a court case that Employment Division versus Smith, which caused religious liberty law to. It was a watershed case where it was reducing the way that courts look at religious liberty, putting it at kind of a lower level than it was before. And Congress wanted to do something. They, I think, almost unanimously passed the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. It was bipartisan. It was supported by left-wing groups and right-of-center groups. Everybody agreed with religious liberty. But these days, as time went on, for instance, in the Conestoga Wood case, dealing with religious liberty that went up to the U.S. Supreme Court, there weren't necessarily a lot of people left of center agreeing with religious liberty, because their view was, if I disagree with what you're trying to do, I don't want your religion to give you the ability to do it. Everybody should think my way. But the problem with that is the same problem that we've got with freedom of speech, right, where I may not like what the next person is speaking, but if I'm not willing to defend his right to speak it, my ability to speak is going to be in turmoil. And so the same thing is true with rights of conscience, with religious liberty. I may not agree with where somebody else draws their line or where their convictions are, but if they don't have those rights, there's nothing stopping government tyranny. Like that is the most fundamental of rights. I think that's why it's the first right in the Bill of Rights.
Right. Right. Well, there are so many people in our country who enjoy the fact that we are the greatest country in the world and that we have
Amen.
Freedom here in the United States, and we are grateful for that. But there are frightfully few people that have any sense of what the role that law plays in all of this, and the degree to which the law can, or the lack of people of goodwill making the case for strong courts and for good legislation. They don't realize how important that is, and oftentimes the people that get elected, maybe the person who's the most telegenic, or the person who has the best jingle, or the best 2-minute compelling message,
right,
as opposed to the person of substance who understands what this country needs to continue to be a great country, and understands our legal process,
Yes.
our system of laws. You understand that. You're uniquely positioned to understand that, which is why you do what you do. But tell the rest of us, tell why it's important. I mean, why is it so important to care? Why should we care about who gets appointed to the Supreme Court? Why should we care about our state Supreme Court justices? Why should we care about the decisions that come before the judges on all these matters? Because there are people who say, well, I'm eating dinner and I don't really bother. Let me change to another channel. But all this stuff matters.
Yeah, well, consider the role of government. And consider the role of government over the past 200 years during the life of our nation, where the role of government was fairly small in the late 1700s, and it kept growing over time and growing over time, so that the things that the government is deciding at this point affect every single area of your life. And we perhaps have noticed that over the past couple of years in the way that we deal with COVID, and we can just mark that up to, ideological problems here and there, we disagree with this, we disagree with that. But just think how much power we give to government to be able to come in every area of life. And if there isn't some way to push back on that when our rights are in jeopardy, we're all in trouble. And so I'd use as an example of that Conestoga Wood Specialties.
So tell our audience about that, because our audience may not be familiar with the specifics of that case.
Conestoga Wood, run by plain Mennonites in Lancaster County, the Hahn family, dear clients, and had contacted us because during the Obama administration, the Health and Human Services Department was mandating that most employers provide abortion-causing drugs and devices as part of healthcare plan. And so for a Christian who takes the world around them seriously, who takes the Bible seriously, pro-life as a result of that, didn't want to be providing drugs and devices that can result in an abortion. We wouldn't have that problem if government was small. But every time government grows, we run into additional problems. So the Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, Congress punted by saying, hey, we'll let the administration decide what preventative health care means and what preventative health care needs to be covered in Obamacare. So they punted that to the agency, and the agency, rather than saying, hey, we're going to find ways to prevent diabetes or prevent heart disease, said, hey, we're going to find ways to prevent pregnancy, but defining pregnancy as pregnancy occurs when the new life is implanted in the womb. But if you can kill it before then, then it's not. Then you're not ending a pregnancy. So much just depends not only on the size of government, but the manipulative words that go into that. So we ended up representing the Hahn family in Conestoga Wood because they didn't know what to do. Christian convictions at stake, again, because of the rise in government. And I remember writing the press release. I was planning to win, so I wrote the press release for the preliminary injunction hearing. I was expecting to get the preliminary injunction in our favor, lost. Went to the Court of Appeals, emergency appeal, wrote again a press release for our win that I didn't get to use because we once again promptly lost. We took the slow boat appeal to the Third Circuit, sought en banc review, and lost every time because the courts kept saying, this is a business, and businesses don't have religious liberty. Forgetting
so even if you're a business and you have Christian principles, you own the business, you happen to be a Christian, you believe the Bible.
Well, exactly. I mean, it's as if they don't really understand. The business doesn't stay awake at night wondering how they're going to pay their employees. It's the owner of the business, right? I mean, so we were trying to make the argument that you can't somehow wash away these First Amendment principles because we need them for a functioning society. For a pluralistic society to work, there needs to be some escape valve. If government's going to come in and try to manage every area of our life, at least give some way to make it workable for those who may be dissenters, religious dissenters. Well, we kept losing because they said, no religious liberty for businesses. So we petitioned the Supreme Court. Hobby Lobby did on the same day. We both filed the same day. The Supreme Court granted both, and our cases were consolidated before the Supreme Court, and we got we got a great decision where the Supreme Court said, yes, businesses that are run by religious people don't lose their First Amendment freedoms. So that was tremendous, and the court also said that this mandate, Health and Human Services mandate, violated the religious liberties of the Hahn family and the Green family, and so that's something that should encourage everyone, even people who aren't religious and people who are not pro-life, because it means we have freedom in this country, and that's something that's so important for us, and so important for us to have judges that recognize the liberties that we have in place. Because if we don't maintain those liberties, we just leave it up to the particular will of the majority at that time. But those things that actually make us special, they get swept away.
Yeah. So this makes it even a more difficult task when you're choosing somebody to sit on the bench.
Oh, yes.
To be a judge. It's not just a matter of saying, oh, well, I'm a D and they're a D, or I'm an R and they're an R, so they're okay. They must be okay. I mean, it really matters what this person's judicial temperament is like, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And it's so much deeper than just political parties as well, because we're at an era right now where ideas of liberalism are in jeopardy. And I remember as a kid, being a Ronald Reagan supporter and loving everything that he was doing, and assuming that the liberals were the problem. And I look now and I think, wait, there's so much that as Americans we share, principles that we share about shared space, about how do we understand our roles vis-a-vis each other, and giving us the room to be who we are. And those are principles that liberals and conservatives have shared. But there are some in society that don't share that, who say, no, it needs to be this way, no other way, and don't give room for dissenters.
Right.
And so that's something to keep in mind right now with the departure of Justice Breyer. He was a traditional liberal, and for that I didn't agree with him on a whole lot of decisions, but at least there was something very much shared there, and my hope would be that we can find that again, because that principle is one of those principles that makes America great.
Yeah. It sounds to me like this is what really wakes you up in the morning, which is a blessing. I mean, in a perfect world, we have people who are on fire for Christ and who feel like they are where they're supposed to be because that's where God put them. And they come at it every day just that way, where this is what God made me to do, and I can't wait to do this, and I can't wait to be great at it, and I can't wait to help people with it. And I love that about you, Randy. I mean, that's clearly at your core, and I wish it could be said of everybody who's in the law business. How do you do your business without getting, so you don't get any public funding, you don't, no. So you guys kind of started because of the Pennsylvania Family Institute, but how do you fund yourselves?
It's people's generosity. 501c3, people donate to the work because they understand that it's important, and for that I'm so grateful. But it reminds me of having to pray for our daily bread. Like, this isn't something that comes naturally. It's not something that comes through billing clients like it did when I was in private practice. This is something that we're reminded time and time again how dependent we are on God to be able to give us the things that we need to be able to keep moving on. But I'm excited to say we've expanded. We have 4 attorneys now, and so the amount of things that we can get involved in has increased. Of course, the world around us, some might recognize, has become a little bit more topsy-turvy as well. So we need that additional help. But it seems like God has always provided for us when we've had the need.
That's wonderfully said. When we return, I'll ask Randy Wenger about Independence Law Center's future. Where are the courts going in the next 10 or 15 years? Don't go away.
You're watching Joe Watkins' State of Independence on Lighthouse TV. Positively different. Share your comments about today's program in the comment box at joewatkins.org.
Well, instead of yelling at the TV, this man is doing something about it as the chief legal counsel for Independence Law Center, a public interest law firm that, among other things, defends life, religious liberty, and parental rights. So, Randy, what's your prediction about the direction of America's courts? That is a big one here. So,
I don't tend to give predictions because that's pretty wide, and we have both our federal courts and our state courts to reckon with. And so, if you were asking me the direction of the courts in 2015, what I would have told you might have looked a little bit more gloomy than in 2017, as there were a lot of folks being appointed to the courts at that point who really shared values, First Amendment values of freedom of religion and a more traditional understanding of the Constitution. And when I say traditional understanding, that words matter, that is not just a living document that can mean whatever we want it to mean at that particular moment in time, but that the words actually matter, that they're a contract between our past, our future, and now to be able to constrain so that we're actually a government of laws rather than a government of men. That's, again, one of the principles that makes America great. And so it depends very much on who is making appointments to the court and what their philosophy is when they're making those appointments. So I was very pleased from 2017 to over those 4 years in terms of what was happening to the courts and our ability to be able to win religious liberty cases during that time period, and the ability to be able to push back against some of the excesses that government was foisting on us.
Who is it that said that government governs best, which governs least?
And that is such a true principle, but oftentimes and traditionally it's been the courts that have been able to push back against that and put government back in its rightful role. But it seems to be a principle that we need to learn every generation.
Yeah.
And so, and the state level, here in Pennsylvania, for instance, we elect our judges, and we've seen.
Is that a good thing?
Well, it's a different way to get there, right? But it really depends. I think ultimately, however we can find a way to be able to get judges that recognize the value of the law itself, and that are not making their decisions based on ideology, but are making their decision based on words having meaning.
Right.
Because that's really how we show fidelity to the purposes behind the Commonwealth in the first place.
So we have to work a little hard. It means that the average voter.
Well, yeah, and the average voter typically doesn't know when you're going in to vote for a judge. You don't necessarily know much, and it's not like for so many other offices, you see all these ads and you begin to get somebody's political philosophy, but you can often find out at least the most important thing about a judge, which is their judicial philosophy. Do they again believe in a living constitution, or do they believe in originalism, that text has meaning and that they're constrained by that meaning? And if we're trying to change government on the big picture level, if that requires a change to the Constitution, change the Constitution. Don't just pretend that it means something else.
Right. Well, that becomes a challenge, I mean, you don't want the judge who's best able to win the beauty contest, so to speak, because, they can give you the best, 2-minute soundbite, or make themselves look the way they think the voters want them to look. But you want somebody whose judicial temperament you can seriously understand and support and appreciate, and understand whether or not they strictly construct the Constitution, or they loosely construct it, or whether or not they're inclined to legislate from the bench.
Yes.
All these are important things to know about somebody who wishes to be a judge of the rest of us. And I don't know that we all get a chance to see it. I know that a lot of people even equipped to make that decision in a ballot box, other than to say, well, there are these 3 Republicans, they get my vote, or these 3 Democrats, they get my vote, or don't.
Right. Well, and I would say for your listeners, our friends at the Pennsylvania Family Institute put together an outstanding voter's guide, and it's a voter's guide that just gives information. It's not saying vote for this person, don't vote for this person. And even for those judicial races, they're able to point to issues of judicial philosophy that can then help voters, people, to make a more informed decision than just seeing, oh, this is the party that's endorsed the candidate.
Right.
So we can go a whole lot deeper when we just look for the information.
Yeah. So if somebody was watching today and they said, you know, man, I love what Randy is saying. I love that that this is his ministry. That, you know, he's not doing this because he's at a big law firm and he's getting huge fees, and that those fees are guaranteed because he knows he has so much business for the next year. But rather, this is somebody who loves the law, who loves the country, and who is trying to do God's work through the framework of his law business. How would they support you at the Independence?
Independence Law Center.
Yeah.
So if they remember Independence Law Center, just Google it.
Yeah.
Independence Law Center. IndependenceLawCenter.org. They can go there. They can find out a little bit more about our organization and how they can donate, provide support, or even if they want to give us a call, learn more. We're happy to sit down with folks. And
if they
tell
donate,
them
you're a
more about our work.
501c3, right? So
Yeah,
there's
right.
there's the possibility of a tax write-off for them.
There is.
Okay, good.
Yep.
And if they want to lend other kinds of support, I guess they're able to do that also?
Well, yeah, and if there are attorneys out there that shared my experience of, wow, I'm kind of sick of representing angry people suing other angry people, and they're looking to volunteer their time and their expertise. There's so often that we're looking for somebody who's got a professional base in a particular area of the law. Like, who knows that really well? And so the more people that we can work with, the better game that we can have out there, because every day we're finding out, oh, there's some new area that we need to learn, like family law in dealing with children and youth. We were dealing with a case where a child was taken away from their parents because the parents, CYS wrote down, the parents' Christian faith was inconsistent with the child's newfound gender identity. And with an attorney here and in the Philadelphia area, we were able to work together because he had an specific expertise there, and worked together with him and got the child back.
Amen. Amen. What amazing work that you're doing, Randy. Well, if you want to learn more about the mission and work of attorney Randy Wenger and his team at Independence Law Center, again, visit his website at independencelaw.org. It's a not-for-profit, it's a nonprofit, so support for Independence Law Center is tax deductible. And more importantly, you'll be helping to do the Lord's work in America's courtrooms. If you're frustrated by politics, by court rulings, by the direction of the world, just remember, God is greater. He's still on the throne. There's no panic or anxiety in heaven. And if you have a minute, send me a line or two in the comment box. I'd love to hear how this conversation with Randy Wenger impacted your thinking. The website where you can do that, of course, and watch past episodes is joewatkins.org. From Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, America's first capital, I'm Joe Watkins. Thanks for watching. God willing, I'll see you next week. Thank you so much, Randy. This was terrific.
This was a treat.
Yeah, what a blessing. Well, I love your spirit. You can just tell this is what God wants you to do. And it just.
Joe Watkins' State of Independence is a production of Lighthouse TV, positively different. Made possible in part because of the support of viewers like you.